The gate of the Shen family compound on Hawthorn Road has been repainted since Mei Shen left, which is the first thing she notices, not the gate itself, whose dimensions and placement she could describe from memory with architectural precision, but the color, which has been changed from the deep red she grew up with to a color that announces wealth in the specific way of people who have recently acquired wealth and want the announcement to precede them into every room. She has been standing on the sidewalk across the street for 4 minutes, performing the specific kind of inventory that a person conducts when they are returning to a place that was taken from them by a story that was not true. Murray's 38 years old. She left at 28. She left in the specific way of someone who has been given no other option, told in the accumulated language of a family that had decided something, that her presence was a wound to the family's reputation that would not heal while she remained. The specific charge that she had in her role as chief financial officer of Shen Family Holdings diverted approximately $4 million across an 18-month period into accounts she controlled. She had not done this. Had known, when the accusation arrived, who had done it. She had not been able to prove it, not in the way that would survive the institutional weight of a family that had decided to believe what was convenient to believe, and the specific institutional weight of a brother-in-law who had spent 3 years cultivating relationships with every significant person in the company and family structure that Mei had spent 10 years building. She had left. She had taken nothing, gone to Singapore with a carry-on bag and $4,000. And she had spent 10 years building the kind of proof that doesn't survive institutional weight because it doesn't survive institutional weight because it is, by the time you present it, so complete and so specifically documented that the institution has no mechanism for refusing it. The gate is prosperity gold. She crosses the street. She rings the bell. In Singapore in March of the year. She left with $4,000 and a carry-on bag and a network of professional contacts, none of whom were willing to meet someone who came with a CV that included 5 years. As CFO of a mid-sized family holding company, the departure circumstances of which she described, to the people she chose to describe it to, as a dispute about methodology. She was hired within 6 weeks as a senior financial analyst, a demotion in title and a survival in practice, which she took with the specific absence of pride of someone who has decided that pride is a luxury she cannot afford while building something that requires her to remain solvent. She used the 4 years of analyst work the way she used everything, as access to information. That information about the Singapore logistics firm, which she served with complete professional integrity, but information in the general sense of understanding how financial systems work, and how money moves, and how the specific mechanisms of concealment she had watched happen to her function technically. She had taken nothing when she left, but she had taken her memory. From her memory, in the evenings and on weekends across 4 years, she built the framework. On the public record company filings, regulatory disclosures, the specific paper trail that any financial operation leaves in databases that remain publicly accessible, she built the documentary foundation. Then she hired Dr. Patricia Lim, who has spent 20 years unraveling financial fraud for the Singapore Commercial Affairs Department, who looked at the framework and said at the end of their first meeting, "This is either a very well-constructed false accusation, or you know exactly what you're looking at." Both, Mei said. "I know exactly what Ima are looking at because it was constructed to be a false accusation against me." "What you're describing is accurate, Dr. Lim said. "The person who did this had access to the company's treasury management system at the administrator level and a working understanding of inter-entity fund flow that isn't available to anyone below CFO." "Below CFO or beside CFO," Mei said. "If you're the deputy CFO who's been managing one of the subsidiaries and you've spent 2 years learning how the parent company's systems work, you know who it is." "Not even on since month 3, Mei said. Eva has spent 7 years learning how to prove it." Patriarch, Mei's father, Franklin Shen, now 68, had built Shen Family Holdings across 30 years from a small import business into a diversified holding company. He was a man of the specific generation and formation that values loyalty above most other things, and that has developed, as a corollary of that value, a specific vulnerability to betrayal. Yes, because betrayal is more common in loyal families, but because the structures that loyalty builds tend to distribute access and information broadly, on the assumption of shared interest, in ways that create opportunity for the rare person who does not share the interest. Mei's brother-in-law, David Chen, had married her sister Linda 6 years before Mei's departure. He had arrived in the family with charm and financial credentials, and a specific quality of attentiveness that ran, to Franklin Shen, as the devotion of someone who genuinely understood and respected what the family had built. He had been given increasing responsibility, first in the logistics subsidiary, then in the treasury management of the parent holding, then in the position of deputy CFO, position that Mei had not recommended and that had been created over her specific, documented objections that her father overruled on the grounds that family unity was more important than organizational chart disputes. The second right about the organizational chart dispute. Correct. David Chen is 51 now. 10 years into a marriage, he has maintained a position of authority within Shen family holdings that has expanded in Mei's absence. Expanded in the specific way that positions of authority expand when the person who occupied the adjacent position of competence has been removed and the person who removed them has no remaining internal check on their access. He is still doing it. Smaller amounts, more carefully, more slowly, but still, she has the proof of what he did originally. She has the proof of what he has done in the years since. She has been waiting until she had both. Opened by a young man Mei doesn't recognize. She states her name. His expression shifts through several things in quick succession before settling on the careful blankness of someone instructed how to respond to contingencies. Full courtyard has also been repainted. Everything slightly more polished, slightly more expensive, slightly more the performance of prosperity than the experience of it, which he reads as the specific signature of David Chen's influence over 10 years. Our father was never interested in looking wealthy. He was interested in being wealthy, which are different orientations and produce different aesthetics. Franklin Shen comes to the courtyard in 5 minutes, which tells her something. He is 68 and smaller than she remembered, which is the specific experience of returning to a parent after a long absence. Not that the parent has actually diminished, but that the child, in the interim, has grown to a size that allows a more accurate perception of the parent's actual scale. He looks at her for a long time without speaking. Mei, he says. Father, she says. They have not spoken in 10 years. The last time they spoke, he told her that he could not have her in the family's presence while the circumstances of her departure remained what they were. She had said she understood. She had not agreed. She had decided that understanding and agreeing were, in this case, 2 different responses to the same instruction, and that she could offer the first without offering the second. I need 2 hours, she says, with you, with Linda, and with David. He came down like lives, something that all 3 of you need to see, and it needs to be seen together. Franklin Shen looks at her, 68, cardiac adjacent, standing in the courtyard of a house he built, looking at a daughter he expelled 10 years ago who has just told him she has something he needs to see. Come inside, he says. Study. The same room where, 10 years ago, Franklin Shen sat across from Mei and showed her the external auditor's report and the bank records and said, "Tell me this is a mistake." She had told him it was a mistake. He had believed the documents more than he had believed her, which was not a failure of love, but a failure of imagination. The specific failure of a person who cannot conceive that someone he trusted more recently than he trusted her could have constructed something this deliberate. David Chen comes to the study last, after Linda, after Franklin, and his expression when he enters and sees Mei is the expression she has spent 10 years waiting to watch arrive. Not guilt, but the rapid internal calculation of someone assessing threat. Mei opens the portfolio she has carried from Singapore. She sets 3 documents on the table. The first document is the forensic audit report prepared by Dr. Patricia Lim, formerly of the Singapore Commercial Affairs Department, covering the 18-month period the original external auditor examined. Dr. Lim had access to the full original financial records through the regulatory disclosure process and conducted an independent analysis of the transaction pattern. She does not look at David Chen while she says this. She looks at her father. The second document is a chain of custody analysis of the administrator-level access to the treasury management system across the same period. This shows that the transactions identified in the original audit were initiated from access credentials that were not mine, credentials issued to the deputy CFO function, and that I did not have the ability to generate myself. Fact that was not examined in the original investigation because the investigation assumed that the CFO had broader system access than the actual access architecture allowed. It's the third document, she says, and now she does look at David Chen, with the specific stillness of someone who has waited 10 years for this sentence, is a continuing pattern analysis prepared by Dr. Lim covering the 7 fiscal years following my departure. It documents 12 transactions across the period that follow the same structural pattern as the original 18 months. The amounts are smaller. The method is identical. That room is very quiet. David Chen says, I want to talk to a lawyer. Conversation is with Linda. Linda Shen is 42, 4 years younger than Mei, and has been married to David Chen for 16 years, and has 3 children who are 12, 9, and 6, and has built a specific shape of a life around a marriage that has now, in the course of one afternoon, revealed itself to be built on the deliberate destruction of her sister's life. Mei finds her in the garden sitting in the specific way of someone who has been hit by something too large to stand under. She sits beside her. I didn't know, Linda says. I know you didn't, Mei says. I believed him, Linda says. I know that too. How are you not? Linda starts and stops. How are you sitting here? How are you not angry? Mei says. Something I would understand. Mei sits with this for a moment. I am angry, she says. I have been angry for 10 years. But anger doesn't organize documents. Anger doesn't hire forensic accountants. Anger doesn't wait. I decided what I wanted, which was this, being in this garden, with this in front of us instead of behind us. Anger would have gotten me something faster and smaller. I wanted this. Belinda looks at her with the specific composition of someone who has just lost something and is not sure yet what the full inventory of the loss is. What happens to my children? Mei has thought about this. That's not mine to decide, she says. She brought what I have to your father. What happens to your marriage is yours. She pauses. I didn't come back to destroy your life. I came back to correct the record, Linda says. My children's father, your children's father made choices, Mei says. A long time ago, and then again, and then again. Those are his choices. Ima responsible for mine. They sit in the garden for a long time without saying anything else. Not silence in the way of estrangement, but silence in the way of two people who need to learn again what the texture of each other's presence is before they can find the words that go after the meeting in the study. Dr. Patricia Lim arrives in Millbrook City and presents the full evidentiary package at a law firm conference table to Franklin Shen, the family's attorney, and Mei. It is during this second presentation that the third document reveals something that Mei herself did not fully understand until Dr. Lim's analysis was complete, something that extends the scope of what David Chen did beyond the original 4 million and into a dimension that Mei had suspected but had not confirmed until Dr. Lim's access to the full regulatory record made it visible. The company that received the diverted funds in the original 18 months was not, as the original investigation had assumed, a shell company David Chen controlled for personal enrichment. Ali's company, a logistics competitor that had been, in the years following Mei's departure, in a position to underbid Shen family holdings on 3 significant contracts that Shen had subsequently lost. David Chen had not been stealing from the family for personal gain. He had been building a competitor, with family money, with Mei's name on it. What this means, Dr. Lim says, in the specific precise register of someone who has spent 20 years finding this kind of thing and has not lost the capacity to find it extraordinary, is that the diversion was not primarily a theft in the conventional sense. It was the capitalization of a competing enterprise, funded through fraudulent transfers from the family company, obscured by an attribution designed to remove the CFO most likely to discover and challenge what was being built. Franklin Shen is quiet for a long time. He was building against us, he says. He has been, Dr. Lim says. Why didn't you tell me what you suspected? Franklin says to Mei. I told you the accusation was false. You didn't believe me. If I had named him specifically without proof, you would have believed that less. I needed proof that was larger than his denial and larger than your faith in him. The proof I needed took 10 years to build. The Shen family does is not simple and not immediate and not the dramatic reversal that stories about vindication are sometimes expected to contain. David Chen is formally separated from his roles at Shen Family Holdings within the week, pending an internal investigation. The investigation confirms Dr. Lim's findings. The matter is referred to the relevant regulatory authorities. The competitor company that was built with diverted Shen funds is the subject of a civil action. None of this is immediate. None of it is clean. Franklin Shen asks Mei, 10 days after the study meeting, whether she will return to the company. He thinks about this for longer than he expected. Not in the same role. Not yet. I need to understand what the company is now before I understand what I could be in it. But I'll stay in the city. I've been in Singapore for 10 years. I'd like to have a longer conversation with the people in this city than whatever this is going to be for the next several months. You have family here, Franklin Shen says. I know. That's part of what I'd like to work out. She looks at her, 68 and smaller than she remembered and sitting in the study where 10 years ago he chose the documents over his daughter's word. And he is not a man who has not spent the past 10 days living with the specific consequence of that choice. Ima, sorry, he says. It is a sentence that does not undo 10 years. Knows this, and he knows she knows this, and the knowing is part of what makes the sentence mean something rather than nothing. I know, she says, we have time. Reinstatement of Mei Shen's professional reputation happens 6 months after her return, in the form of a notice from the relevant regulatory body that the findings of the original external audit have been reviewed. The original findings are reversed, and the record of professional misconduct attributed to Mei Shen is expunged. It is, as documents go, short. It contains the words "no evidence of misconduct" in a sentence that takes approximately 4 seconds to read. Mei reads it once. She does not feel the specific dramatic flood of vindication that the imagining of this moment sometimes produced across 10 years. She feels something quieter and more structural, the specific sensation of a weight she has been carrying long enough that she had stopped noticing it as weight, suddenly and completely gone. She calls Dr. Patricia Lim. The expungement notice came through. I know they CC'd me. Congratulations, thank you for all 10 years of everything. 7 Dr. Lim says, I was only involved for 7. 10 Mei says, I was involved for all 10. The first 3 were just me in the framework and the library databases. Dr. Lim is quiet for a moment. What will you do now? Al looks out the window of the apartment she has rented in the city, not on Hawthorn Road, not in the family compound, but in the city where she grew up, close enough to be present and far enough to be herself. Which is the specific geography of someone who has come home, but has not returned to who they were before they left. Ima going to practice being here, she says. I've been building towards something for 10 years. I've gotten here. I need to learn what here actually is. That sounds, Dr. Lim says, like someone who has finished one kind of work and is starting another. Yes, Mei says, I think that's months right. After the gate on Hawthorn Road opened for Mei Shen, Shen Family Holdings has a new CFO. A woman Mei recommended from her Singapore network. That's someone whose technical capability she can vouch for with the specific authority of someone who has tested it in conditions that matter. David Chen's civil case is ongoing. The criminal referral is in process. Mei does not follow it closely. Eli's given her testimony, and what happens next is the system doing what systems do with complete information. Linda has filed for divorce. Mei and Linda are in the specific early phase of rebuilding something that was interrupted for 10 years. Linda has called 3 times since the garden conversation. The calls have been short and have been the calls of someone reaching across a distance too large to span in one call but committed to spanning eventually. Mei answers every time. Thankfully, Shen is seeing a cardiologist at Mei's specific insistence. He is, the cardiologist has said, manageable. He is, Mei has decided, being managed. She goes to the compound on Hawthorn Road every Sunday. This is not yet comfortable. If it may become comfortable, she has decided to give it the time it requires rather than the time she would prefer to require. The gate on Hawthorn Road is still prosperity gold. She stopped registering it as an announcement of someone else's stewardship and started registering it as a gate, an object with a function, which opens and closes, which she can stand on either side of. On Sundays, she stands on the inside. The record is corrected. The proof has been delivered. The work she built toward is done. The work she is beginning does not have a name yet. She is learning what to call it. She thinks it might be home.